one of the studies is going to be with play therapists and understanding their perceptions around if COVID is a trauma and their experience working digitally with children over lockdown, and then kind of what the impact of the pandemic that they're seeing on children is. So I really want to make sure I get their experience. We're seeing a lot of news stories and a lot of the narrative around the pandemic shifting, and absent of that seems to be therapists' understanding of what's happening and like how client loads are changing and like the lingering impacts of kind of what this pandemic is doing for us.
Hi, I'm Kim Tolson and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey. Now, here's a question for my listeners. Do you offer your clients a super bill for their therapy visits? And do you know if your clients are actually successful in navigating their benefits and getting reimbursed? Dealing with insurance is probably your least favorite part of being a therapist, and you can bet your clients don't enjoy the hassle either. Thankfully, there's Superbill, a company that supports you as a provider and helps your clients utilize their out-of-network benefits. Here's how it works. Superbill does a free benefits check. If the client has out-of-network coverage, Superbill's team of experts submits their superbills directly to the insurance payer. From there, your client can track their reimbursement status online and lean on Superbill's team to resolve any rejected claims. When your clients save time and money on their therapy, you can retain them longer, and it's a win-win situation. Let Superbill do the heavy lifting for seamless out-of-network insurance claims. Visit thesuperbill.com/Kim Tolson to sign up. That's thesuperbill.com/KYMTOLSON. And get your first month free when you use the promo code Kim Tolson. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. So I'm here today with Sydney Conroy. I'm so excited you're here. I can't wait for you to tell your story and what you're doing. It's really exciting and interesting to me. So welcome to the podcast. And I'd love it if you'd start just by telling us, like, how'd you go from being like your typical therapist to a traveling therapist?
Yeah, I would say the pandemic is what kind of brought about the whole transition for me. I was working in Seattle as a child therapist and play therapist at an agency. I started kind of seeing how the pandemic was impacting my work as a therapist, doing it virtually, and then also kind of just the reactions of children in general, which spurred me to get a PhD. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I applied to the University of Cambridge here. We have a research lab that studies play and is funded by the Lego Foundation. And so I knew as a play therapist, it would be a perfect fit.
Wow, that is amazing. And Cambridge is in, remind me, what
England.
part of, in England. Okay, I didn't know, like, what town in England? Is it just?
In Cambridge itself. It's
it's in Cambridge. Okay.
Yep.
I'll probably edit that part out.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's so funny. I mean, I know nothing about like that part of Europe, so it's just so interesting. So, okay, so you decide, all right, middle of the pandemic, I'm just going to go get my PhD and go to Cambridge. Yeah.
Yep,
Okay. So how did that process happen? I'm just so curious to just hear how that all played out.
It really kind of was me reflecting that how often children are left out of research. And then in general, how therapists themselves are left out of research. So I was reading in my master's all of this research, but I was like, none of it is applicable once you're inside of the room. Like none of it plays out in the way that academics write about it. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I want to go and change, A, that kids aren't involved in it. I want them to be involved. And then B, I want a therapist, being me, to be able to write and communicate it so that it's applicable and useful to therapists out there.
Wow. Okay. So how long will you be there for?
The program is 3 years, which is another reason I chose a UK program versus a US program, is that once you have your master's, obviously you can practice as a therapist in the States. So I didn't want to go through a longer program that was going to make me do that training again.
Wow.
So this is just a research PhD. You apply with your proposal, and then they kind of give you 3 years to execute it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So are you still working while you're over there, or is it so time consuming that you can't still see
So
clients?
I'm in the process of registering here in the UK, but it is an
Okay.
absolute mess having trained in the US and then trying to
Wow.
register here as a therapist, not having trained here.
Wow.
So
Okay.
clinical psychologists are regulated in the UK, but
Okay.
counselors and psychotherapists are not. And the difference, which I didn't realize between the terms for people in the UK, is counselors tend to be like shorter term. Like, I maybe want to break up with my partner, so you would go for like a problem essentially. Whereas if
Uh-huh.
you're a psychotherapist, it would be kind of a longer term, like, I'm noticing I have this pattern in relationships, I want to work through it. So counselors
Wow.
and psychotherapists both don't have any sort of national regulation.
Wow.
You ethically are supposed to register with an accredited body, but it's sort
Okay.
of up to your discretion about which one you want to join. And obviously there's like reputations for certain ones that it's just hard to understand, not knowing the community or any of these people. So it takes
Wow.
so much research trying to figure out what to do.
Oh my gosh. So what have you figured out about it? So you're in the process of trying to get registered. So I guess that means you've like picked picked one of the bodies you'd like to register with, or like how
Yes.
did you decide that? Like, and what
So
are they?
being a,
Like, what are the bodies? I'm
yeah,
just so curious about
there
it.
are some bigger ones, but Association of Counseling Psychotherapy is
Okay.
one.
Oh.
There's a couple like large ones, and then I'm applying to the play therapy ones just because I want the parents that I'm doing research with their kids, I want them to know kind of my standard of training, I guess. And so one of the play therapy regulation boards do not allow you to join unless you've taken their coursework. So there's no route to doing that if you're not trained using them,
Wow.
which
Okay.
is really frustrating. And then the second one does have a portfolio route where you kind of lay out all of your training, and then you kind of submit that to them and they go through that. But something that I think, and if anyone is training out there that's listening to this, you have to be in personal therapy while you're getting your training in order to get registered with this body, which I understand in the US is not a requirement for most programs.
No. It probably should be, but no, it's not.
Yes, right. And I know plenty of people, even in my own program when I was training in my master's, that chose to not do therapy at the time. And I just decided that I wanted to. And so I did. But it's the only thing that's kind of allowing me at this point to get registered with that one, because the other one wouldn't even accept me.
Wow. So
Yeah.
do you have to have a therapist over there, or can it be a therapist in the
I
United States?
don't, so it needed to be a therapist while I was getting trained. So while I was
Oh,
in my play therapy training, I
I
had to have had
gotcha.
a therapist. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
if you didn't do
Wonderful.
that, what do you do?
You would not be able to register with either one of the play therapy specific ones, and I would have to go to a
Wow.
general one, which I think, just kind of like in the States, the parents don't know the ins and outs of all of that, so it may
Yeah.
not really affect it. But
Hmm.
to me, it's
Hmm.
important just to know that, like, the quality of care that people know that I can provide based off of my training.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Wow. So that's so interesting to me. So you want to get registered there so you can see clients based there in England with you, or okay,
Correct.
instead of like doing like back and see like seeing your clients from Seattle and doing remote
Yes,
therapy. I'm just
because
curious
it's
about like
a
that decision. Yeah.
8 to 9 hour time difference depending on daylight savings.
Oh.
We switch at a different point than you guys in the States, which I didn't
Oh.
realize until I moved here. So yeah, just 8 hours trying to do, and especially like with children, it's an after school thing. So it would be
Oh,
really early into
yes.
my morning here, and it's just not applicable
That makes so
to
much
see people in
sense.
the US anymore.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Yeah,
So,
it's so different.
can you see clients there in the UK at all, or you totally have to be registered before you can?
So because there's no regulation or there's no like national accreditation, technically I could. Ethically,
Okay,
I'm choosing not to until I'm regulated. So because
I
there's no
got you.
national thing, anyone can kind of pop up with a website and say, I'm doing this and I'm a therapist. And because they don't use that therapist language, they use the psychotherapist and counselor language.
Hmm.
Some of it just gets muddled, especially like if you're adding coaches and social workers and all of that into the mix. People
Hmm.
just don't know what kind of care they're getting here because unless you were accredited, they don't understand whose rules you're following,
Wow.
which to me
Wow.
feels really scary for
Well, yeah,
people.
because anybody could say they're a counselor, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Oh my
And
goodness.
so I don't plan, because I'm on a student visa here as a PhD student, there's a stipulation that you're not allowed to do self-employed work, meaning I could never set up a
Oh.
therapist practice on a student visa. So I would have to switch visas in order to be able to open a private practice or anything if I wanted to do it myself.
Wow.
Another,
Okay.
yeah, piece that I didn't fully understand until I
Oh my
moved here.
gosh. That's so
Um,
interesting. So if you
yeah.
get registered and then you want to see clients there, you'd have to switch your visa, basically.
I would have to be employed by someone on my student visa.
Oh,
And then
I
once I
see.
graduate, if I switch to a working visa, then I could open a private practice. But just as a
Oh.
student, I have to be employed by someone in order to be a therapist.
Oh
And
my
that's not
gosh.
really how their system seems to work. A lot of their therapists are self contracted. So you would be
Wow.
self contracted by a school or by the NHS or by, they call their nonprofits charities. Um, and so those people would kind of allow you to see their people, but you wouldn't ever be an employee under them. And so on the student visa, it's nearly impossible, so far in my experience,
Oh
to
my
be a therapist.
gosh.
This is really sad.
Oh my gosh. So did you know all that before going, or is it just kind of like trial and error?
I
You've been
knew
figuring this out.
some of it, but some of it's been a lot harder than I anticipated. One part also being the background check. You have
Oh,
to
how
be
did that happen?
here 6 months before you can even apply for a background check. And then they want five
Wow.
years history for any country that you lived in previously. And so I had only been in the US, but say I had been traveling around and working in different places, I would have to have government background checks from every country that I had lived in for the last 5 years to submit for my, they call it a
What?
DBS check.
Are you serious?
Yes. And so that's something I had no idea about. I didn't even realize I needed to wait 6 months.
Yeah.
All of that kind of stalled a lot for me because I just assumed I could, I don't know, prove that I was safe
Yeah.
by applying right away, and you have to wait.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and you could tell me you don't want to talk about it if you don't want to, but like, how are you like making money? Like, how are you living? Is it just savings? Is it like student loans? Like, I'm just so curious. Like, you go over there not knowing all this, and then it's like,
Yeah.
I'm in school for 3 years. I'm just like wondering, like, what?
Yeah, it's a mix. Some of it is PhD funding, some of it is loans, and then some of it is savings. And then I can do some digital work in the US, which I am also doing part time.
Oh, okay. Like therapy related or something totally different than.
It is therapy related. It's with a new startup. It's called Ours Wellness, and they work relational wellness.
Oh.
And so I'm doing some research for them digitally.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
Yeah,
you're making it work with all these like
making it
curveballs
work.
being thrown at
Yes.
you. Oh my gosh. So what is it like living there? Like culturally, like before we hit record, we were talking about the weather because I'm actually sitting outside at a public library because I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and there's no Wi-Fi in this entire town. Um, so, it's been an adjustment for me, but I just couldn't even imagine what the adjustment might be like over there for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So Cambridge, I didn't fully, I mean, I moved here without having been to the university or the town whatsoever. I'd been to the
Wow.
UK, I'd gone to London and kind of explored a little bit, but it's a small village here, and I didn't fully know that
Is
going
it
into
really?
it. It's
Oh,
so much smaller than I thought. You can walk from one end to the other in about an hour or so if you're feeling motivated. Most people cycle here.
uh,
I still look on the wrong side of the road when I'm crossing the street,
oh
so
yeah.
I don't get on a bike yet.
Oh wow. Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, and it's interesting. It's a really diverse group of people. Almost everyone that I know is from a different country. And so there's less
Wow.
British people at the university than I imagined. It's just
Oh,
people
really?
from like all over the world, which is amazing.
That's so interesting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So the PhD, I guess once you get it, like how does it translate back if you want to come back to the United States? I'm just curious, like,
Yeah. So my PhD is going to be in education because that's where the lab is housed here. So it won't
okay.
be a psychology or anything related.
Oh,
So
I
it
see.
wouldn't make me a psychiatrist or psychologist. So I would go, if I come back to the States, I would still be using my LMHC to sort of practice. But
Okay, I see.
would still be a doctorate regardless.
Wow. Okay. So, I don't even know if you could talk about your research and have you discovered anything? Because before we hit record, we were also kind of talking about that. Would you mind
Yeah.
sharing what you're studying? I think it's so
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. Yeah, so it's going to be a multi-study PhD, and it's one of the studies going to be with play therapists and understanding their perceptions around if COVID is a trauma and their experience working digitally with children over lockdown, and then kind of what the impacts of the pandemic that they're seeing on children is. So I really want to make sure I get their experience. We're seeing a lot of news stories and a lot of the narrative around the pandemic shifting, and absent of that seems to be therapists' understanding of what's happening and like how client loads are changing and like the lingering impacts of kind of what this pandemic is doing
Wow.
for us. So that will be one study. And then another
Wow.
study is there's no or very little research around what children think is happening when they're going to therapy.
Wow.
And so I
Oh,
want to
yeah.
get kind of a child's perspective of what do they think happens in play therapy? Why do they think they're going to play therapy? How do they think it's helping? So that will sort of be
Yeah.
like a interview, but through play with children. So that'll be
Oh,
really
wow.
interesting to see how that plays out.
That is so interesting because I wonder. I mean, I've heard parents say, "Well, you're going to talk to the feelings doctor or something like that," like that kind of thing. But yeah, I do wonder about that. Like, what do they even
Yeah,
think?
and there's the
Yeah.
added dynamic of in play therapy, parents want children to talk. And as a play therapist, you have to be like, well, we're playing and they're talking through their toys and their stories in the play, but we're not going to talk about feeling anxious in the same way that I would talk about with a teenager or that I would with an adult. And so you also kind of have to battle like parents' perceptions of what they think you do in the room. And then the added layer of like, what do the children even think we're doing in the room?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is such a hard dynamic, I think. Like I worked with teenagers some, but
Mm-hmm.
it was always like the worst part was having to deal with the parents, it's like
Yeah.
because I kind of like saw where the teenager was coming from, it was like tough for me. That's a boundary I learned early on in my career. Like I just don't do well with that dynamic, like trying to manage the parents and the children, and like it was hard for me to like be unbiased, and I don't know, but I really
It's
admire
challenging.
people like you that can like manage the parents like that because I feel like that would be such a huge aspect of it.
Hey, Morgan from Superbill here. You've told your clients that you're out of network and that you can give them a Superbill, but what happens next? Dealing with insurance is the least favorite part of your job. It's one of the reasons you're a private pay provider, but you care about your clients and their ability to continue their care with you. Enter Superbill. We save you and your clients time and money with benefits checks, claim filing and tracking, denial resolution, and concierge support. Let us do the heavy lifting of navigating out-of-network benefits. Learn more at thesuperbill.com/Kim Tolson.
It's really challenging, and it's hard when parents
Yeah.
choose to not be a part of treatment, and then it's hard when parents are actively involved in treatment.
I bet.
Just rough regardless.
You never get that perfect parent, like the sweet spot that's like just right, probably.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I'm just curious. I know this is off the topic of traveling, but like, what do you think? Do you think it's been traumatic for kids, or do you think the play therapy, over video or whatever, is as effective? I'm just curious. I know you're researching it, but just what is your like hypothesis on it?
I think the pandemic is showing up in trauma less how it's typically been defined as this like big individualistic event that like leads to PTSD. I think
Yeah.
it's going to show up more as like a collective ongoing trauma, in the way that like racial trauma or poverty or these other types of things
Right.
harm people long term. So I think that's sort of how I imagine. I don't foresee, we haven't seen a ton of kids get diagnosed with PTSD. We're not seeing kind of these like massive, large impacts of it in that way. I think it's going to be like a subtle, our kids fully processing what lockdown really meant to them. What about like if their friends are immunocompromised and suddenly they're having to fight for masks and it's not for them, for someone else, but they're still navigating relationships. Like, I think it's going to show up in a lot more nuanced ways that we would only get from therapist perspectives of like being in the room with people that are processing that week after week. You're not necessarily going to hear that from teachers or parents or people that aren't dedicated to looking to those specific issues, I guess.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I'll be so curious to read your research and what you come up with. Yeah.
Love to share.
Oh my gosh. So do you think after you finish all this over there, you'll come back to the United States, or do you like it over there? Do you like want to stay? Like, I'm just curious how you're feeling about it.
Yeah, I do think I'll stay. We get a graduate extension visa once we graduate. So it's for 2 years, and we're allowed to kind of look for work for the 2 years after we graduate. And so I could see myself trying out Scotland or Northern Ireland, or maybe moving around a little bit, but still within the UK, so I can stay on my visa. But yeah, afterwards, I don't know. I am limited to English speaking countries and clients because I don't speak another language. I wish that I did, but I don't. So that kind of limits, I guess, where I go next. But I'm not set on moving back to the US yet.
Yeah, I hear you. Because you've been there, you said 6 months? Is that what you told me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
They moved to, in October.
Wow, well that's exciting. So when you're doing that extended 2 years, would that would still be the student visa, or would you switch to the other visa when you did that?
It would become a graduate visa, and I'm not sure what the stipulations are on that, if I could set up a practice or work or not. Well, I could work, but I don't know if I can be self-employed. So that's something that I would have to find out more about.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you probably could be working with clients in Seattle, but ethically it feels like not right for you. And I'm just curious, do you want to talk about that at all? Like how that, like the ethics around that for you, like what that means, or because I don't think we talk about that a lot. I think it particularly on the Traveling Therapist podcast, it's more about like, okay, I just want to make money, so I can live and travel, but we don't really talk about that much. So I'm just curious, like your thoughts on that, if you want to get into that at all.
Yeah, it's mostly a practical thing of just like sleeping and functioning well in my life here. I couldn't do that on that time zone. But I also think it's hard working with children digitally. I did it during lockdown and I still felt like it was effective. And I ended up switching from an agency to a practice in the middle of that. And so I got a whole new set of clients that I'd never met in person, and I had to say goodbye to them digitally. And so I know that it's possible, and I felt like we did effective work, but there's something about like the safety of me being so far away and never like having that in-person relationship with them that just feels a little for me.
It just doesn't feel right. Yeah. No, I get that. That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it would be nice. I'm still I left before I submitted my LMHC applications. I'm still an LMHCA right now.
Oh,
and I have to
I
figure
see.
out how to mail fingerprints back to Washington State in order to get fully licensed.
Oh
So
my
that's something
gosh.
I'm navigating. But I would like to see like which states I have reciprocity in and see if any of them on the West Coast or East Coast I am, because that's only a 5-hour difference. And I could
Yeah.
like see a client in the afternoon and feel okay maybe doing that.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, just not something I'm able to do right now.
Yeah, gosh. That makes so much sense though. Just, I mean, kids and after school and the time zones, like I never even thought about that, you know?
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a bit harder than I thought to move and be a therapist here when you're trained elsewhere. It seems different if you were trained here and like move and then come back. But there's something about being trained in a country and then trying to get registered in a different one.
Yeah.
It's hard.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So much to think about. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just lots of research. It's not impossible. It just takes a lot of thought and information.
Yes. So I'm just curious, like, I think when you'd sent me your notes, you had talked a little bit about, let's see what else. Terminology shifts. That's kind of what we were talking about already, right? Like the counselor versus the psychotherapist and all that stuff. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then when you said in your notes, like being in a niche modality, is that what you meant, like around play therapy and like having to like work out the times and all this? I got you. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
because I think it might have been easier and or different if I was like working with adults and I could just apply to one of the general registries, and then I would probably feel more comfortable seeing people in the States as adults, like knowing they have a better support system and all of that. But I think particularly with children, if you're in an environment that's not safe and I can't do anything because I'm across an entire ocean, that just feels hard.
I get it. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big things, because I actually, like, I don't know if you know who Amber Lyda is. I took her online step-by-step course, and that was one of the things that we really talked about, you know, is like making sure they meet a different criteria for safety, like being on video, you know, like it's a whole nother level you have to think about. And then with kids, it's like, you know, are the parents listening in the room? Like, you don't probably even know like what is going on the video. I just think it would just be so much more complicated.
Absolutely. When we saw that during lockdown too, about like you'd see them on video, but then you would be getting things on the chat that like they couldn't say out loud because they didn't know if anyone was listening. And you have to be very intentional, and it's maybe not as safe for some children to be seen at home. And if that's the only way that I can see them, it also feels like maybe I'm doing them a disservice, that they could go see someone else in person now that things are open.
Yeah. Oh, that makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what else I want to ask you about? So how about your family, loved ones? Did you go by yourself? Did you bring like a significant other with you? I'm just curious about that part too.
I did it all by myself.
Oh my gosh.
And it was right at the end of kind of all of the really harsh travel restrictions.
Wow.
But it was really up in the air about if I needed to quarantine when I got here, and if anyone was going to come with me, were they going to have to quarantine? Would we have to do it at a hotel? Would they be able to help me move to Cambridge right away? Because you have to fly into London and then take a whole train and get to Cambridge. And so it was just way too complicated, and it ended up being like it was going to be less helpful and more work. So I had like 4 or 5 suitcases, and I got those really large, you know, how you can wrap them around. I like bunch it together and got into an Uber and moved myself.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. It was a lot.
It's
I
really
don't know
brave.
if I would do it again by myself. It's a lot
so
of
funny.
Just like wheeling the luggage enough was like hard.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine. It's so funny. Stuff like, it's like, gosh, I don't know, if I look back on it, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But yeah, I mean, even this traveling therapist, digital nomad thing, it's like stuff like this, like sitting out in front of the library at like 6 a.m. here, you know, it's like, what am I doing actually? You know?
Right.
But then it's
How
like,
did I get here?
But it's like, oh yeah, I went on that awesome hike yesterday, and I'm living in Sedona for a while, and you know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But there are things like that when you look back on it, it's not easy. It is hard, you know. And it's like, ooh, if I'd known, maybe I wouldn't have. But But you're there
Right.
now.
But then
So.
sometimes you don't know until you get here.
Exactly.
I learned that with a bank account, that you have to have a residential address in order to get a bank account, but then they don't want you to be paying rent out of a foreign bank account, which makes sense. And so it, like, even like renting a place was a nightmare, and just like some things that I'm like, no one told me that. And I'm at a university, so I'm like, University of Cambridge has international students. I know they know what they're doing. And it's just like devoid on any forms or anything. But I'm like, that would have been nice to know before I got here.
So you didn't have, so none of that was set up even? Like you got
No,
there?
so
I
got there, my phone was on airplane mode, so I had to go and get a SIM card, and they don't do like phone contracts in the same way that we do in the States. You kind of just plug it in, and it's like a pay-as-you-go situation.
Wow.
They like switched that over and like made everyone download WhatsApp. Be like, this is how you're gonna talk to me now.
Wow.
Yeah, just right off the bat, you
gosh.
gotta figure it out.
Oh my gosh. And to be a PhD student on top of all that.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like that alone, I couldn't even imagine doing. Like that seems like so much stress. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And was your family real supportive when you said you were going to do this, or were they like, what are you thinking? Like just.
No, they were supportive. I had done a study abroad during my undergrad in Rome. And so I was gone for 5-6 months. And so we kind of did the drill of all of that anxiety and stuff when that was happening. And then it's the University of Cambridge. No one's ever going to tell you like you shouldn't go, you know?
Seriously, yes. That's a good point, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So you had some overseas like long-term travel like under your belt already before. Okay. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't jump into this like without any experience.
Yeah. Wow. Either way, it's so brave, I think, especially in the middle of like a pandemic, you know?
I do forget that is happening sometimes.
Yeah. What's it like over there? Is it like, are things on lockdown, or is it pretty much, because here it's pretty open.
Yeah, same here. They took away all mask restrictions, all travel restrictions. Everything is just kind of open. We were, because we have the NHS, which is the National Health Service, and our healthcare is universal. They were mailing us at home rapid COVID tests, and then they took that away recently. So now we have to go pay for tests again, which is not great.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So are you having to get tested still to do things, or?
Yeah, we have a lot of like formals and these like really grand events here at Cambridge, which is really lovely. But they try and have us test before we all get together for our halls and stuff.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. So it feels pretty safe, but
yeah,
still a pandemic.
I see. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, gosh, this is so interesting. Oh my goodness. So
it's a whole different world.
Yeah. So is there anything we didn't like touch on that you think people should know if they want to come like work from the UK, or, you know, like as therapists?
Not really. I feel like we hit most of it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think like the background check was the biggest thing that I was shocked about, but I'm like, all therapists need to know that it's going to take a minute to get cleared for that. But then everything else, it kind of just depends on where people are trying to get registered. And
yeah. Wow. So interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I don't know what time. What time is it there? I'm just curious. What time are you?
It is 3:30.
Oh, 3:30. Okay, so it's 7:30 a.m. here. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You're my last meeting of the day.
Okay. Oh, good. Hopefully you can go have some fun or do something great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to reach out to you, can they reach out to you to learn more about this or connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Sydney Conroy _. And then I have a Instagram where I'm kind of documenting my experiences here as a PhD student. And so that's at a Cambridge Chronicle.
Oh, wow. I'm going to go follow you right after this. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And I just wish you the best on this journey. It's so exciting. I would love to hear about your research once you get it all
let's
completed.
Definitely keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.